Hi, everybody. I just want to introduce Courtney Bailey. Courtney, I believe I've made you co-host as well.
Mhm.
Okay. Courtney Bailey is an English language lecturer, international teacher trainer, and curriculum designer with more than a decade of experience in K through 12 higher education and English language teaching leadership across global settings. You are currently ABD in a PhD program, Courtney? Yeah?
That's
And
correct.
and specialize in creating inclusive, learner-centered curricula for culturally and linguistically diverse learners. Courtney has delivered educator training in over 10 countries and serves on the NAFSA leadership team as the Intensive English Programs Coordinator. In this role, she supports initiatives that promote linguistic justice, digital integration, and professional development. So thank you for being here with us today, Courtney.
Nathan, thank you.
Thank you.
So we can go ahead and get started.
Yes,
Good
yes.
morning. Okay, good. Good morning or good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. And happy Saturday. I'm so happy to be able to share a bit of time and space with you all. I'm so proud of you guys and excited that you are here because it's Saturday and you guys can be anywhere else, but you're choosing to be here and invest in yourself and to learn more and to grow. So I don't take that lightly. We're so happy that you're here to share this space with us. And so I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. Give me just a second to pull that up. And I did share a link. Let's see here. Hopefully everybody can see my screen. I'm just going to wait a little bit longer because I see that there's still some people joining. Okay. So I'm going to encourage you during this session to go ahead and share. Really, this is your time and your space, and I really want you to reflect on what it is that you do, your philosophies, your mindset, your beliefs, and what you actually want to incorporate into the classroom. So feel free to open your mic if you'd like to. Feel free to make use of the chat box, which I will often prompt you to do so. And I also encourage you to have a notebook or a piece of paper or something that you can take notes on so that way you can actually reflect on your own practices. And then finally, I would like to share that there are some information heavy slides, and that's intentional. And the reason why I did that is because oftentimes when I attend PD, I can't remember what the speaker said. I get little bits and pieces and I have my notes, but when I go back to reflect, I can't really remember everything that was said. So I would like for you guys to know that some of these slides are information heavy, just so that if you are to go back and receive the information and try and absorb it, it's all there for you. Okay. And I also shared in the chat box, and I'll share it one more time before we get started, a link to all of the materials that I'm sharing with you today. So even though this is being recorded, you'll have access to all of my materials immediately. So, the title of my presentation is called Teaching on Purpose, Using Reflective Practice to Shape Instruction. And it's my hope that by the end of the presentation today, you will have left feeling inspired to reflect, and you'll feel reconnected with your why, or have a better idea or a better understanding of what your why even is. And so I've designed this presentation with both the new teacher and the seasoned teacher in mind. So maybe you're reconnecting with it, or maybe you're trying to develop it. Okay. So we'll go ahead and get started. And as Mason said, I'll slow it down because he said it really quickly. And I know that we saw people coming in, but I am an English language lecturer, an international teacher trainer, and a curriculum designer. I will work in both domestic and international context, and I do have, I'm earning a PhD in English language learning, all but dissertation right now. I have delivered teacher training in more than 10 countries, and I serve with NAFSA. So NAFSA is an association that is it's for international educators. Okay, just trying to calibrate and making sure that we're serving international students, regardless of where they are in the world. Well. And my work includes organizing international ELT conferences, advising institutional leaders, and mentoring teachers. So I say all this because I want you to know that if there's an organization that you're interested in, or if there's something, I like to use these PDs for networking. So if there's something that I've said that resonates with you, or if I can guide you or help you in any way, please let me know. As far as the overview for this presentation, we've just done the introduction. We're really going to talk about why reflective practice matters. We'll do an interactive reflection activity. We'll talk about some practical applications. So we're going to talk about our beliefs and then our design. How do we actually start a lesson and how do we incorporate what we've planned effectively for our students, regardless of the context, if they're young learners, if they're adult students. We'll do some final reflection and takeaway and then question and answer. But I want to set our intention. Okay. I want to set the tone and I want to make sure that we understand what our goals are. So by the end of this session, I hope that you guys will be able to define the purpose of a teaching philosophy. Also explain how philosophy informs your decisions about teaching and learning. I also hope that you will be able to articulate core values that shape your instructional approach. I want you to be able to reflect on your own practices that support your professional growth. And then also recognize the role of reflective practice and intentional value-based instruction. So there's a lot of wording there, and I'm going to break everything down. And like I said, if you joined a little bit late, some of these slides are very information heavy, but again, that's intentional because I want you guys to be able to take this after the fact and reabsorb it and really connect with the information being shared. Okay, so I'm going to invite you to use the chat box for about 3 minutes. Okay, and I want to know what originally brought you into education. Why are you in your educational role, whether it's a teacher or maybe you serve varying roles. Okay, so what originally brought you into education? And what is a teaching philosophy in your opinion? Okay, so you have about 3 minutes to answer those 2 questions in the chat box. Now, this does not have to be polished. Don't worry about spelling, grammar, or anything like that. Okay, this is just for us to start the reflection process. So again, what originally brought you into education? And what is a teaching philosophy? So I will give you some time to answer those questions. And so that I'm not glaring at you, I'm going to turn my video off, right? In 3 minutes, you're going to answer those in the chat box.
Mason Blanford. You've heard from me throughout the day today. I've been hosting the other speakers, introducing them, thanking them. So now it will be my turn to talk about my topic today. Um, a little bit about me. I've been teaching for about 5 or 6 years. I've taught in South Korea and Russia, and then now in Poland. Before this, I was a journalist for a while in the U.S. And then I left that to move into teaching. So I got my CELTA a couple of years ago, and then ever since then, I've gone back to it, and I've gotten back into teaching, and it's been fun. So, someone in here. So, oh, hello, Denise. Hi. So about today, we've had a lot of good speakers today. Um, and with my topic, what I'm hoping is that we can have somewhat of like an interactive discussion today, an active conversation, and you'll see on the PDF that you got by email that's we'll be talking about functions today. Okay? So can anybody tell me then with modality, um, when do we always teach modality in the classroom? And if you don't want to use your microphone, you can type in the chat. But when do we always teach modality and modals in the classroom? Let's see. I think Zoe says, or Sean says, when we want to say what we are going to do, when we're going to do something. Zoe says, when there's intent to what we're saying, giving suggestions, giving advice. Yeah. Okay. And what structures do we often teach modals in? or pretty much always. One second, not the So what structures do we use to teach modals? And I'm hearing, yeah, Sylvia, conditionals, would, should, right, right. So we use conditionals to teach modals basically always in the classroom. And we don't really talk about modals outside of that, essentially. Can we think of any other situation where we do? Yeah, future meaning, future tense. Yeah. So we express conditionals, future tense. So today, basically, I want to talk about functions in the English language. Second. And my first question for that with functions is, what exactly do we use modals for? I mean, we talked about conditionals, we talked about future tense. So we use modals for predictions, right? We use them for chance. What would be a third one that we use modals for? Well, let me open the chat here. Speculation, possibility, giving suggestions, advice. Yeah, yeah. We could also say ability. Hold on 1 second. I'm trying to fix this. Here we go. Okay, so we would use basically that modals are versatile. We'd use them for predictions, chance. There you go. Abilities. 1 second. Predictions, chance, abilities, right? And we also use them in functions. And then, if I'm pronouncing your name correctly, and if you're saying permission, prohibition, necessity, and such, yeah, yeah, you got the right idea of it. So basically, functions, we use modals to express functions, right? So for what exactly are functions in the English language? What purpose do they serve in the English language? Communication tools, requests, suggestions. Okay, okay. You show the attitude of the speaker. Yeah. We accomplish day-to-day tasks. You could say that, yeah. So basically, we're saying the purpose that we speak, the intent that we speak with, right? They express a social nuance. So what would be some more examples of functions then in the English language? Giving instructions, negotiation. Okay. And social functions. Okay. When would we use the modal should? Everybody can see what I'm typing on the whiteboard too when I'm typing, right? We see the should modal. Okay, thank you. So when would we use the modal should? For giving advice, giving information, making requests, suggestions, expressing ability, predictions, promise, obligation. Okay, so my question would be then for you, would should be used for advice or suggestions? Advice, suggestions. Actually, okay, so we have differing opinions here. Okay, so what's our argument for why advice and why suggestions then? And you guys feel free to use the microphone too if you feel like doing that, or you can just use the chat too. That's okay too. All right. Advice. Okay. Oh, okay. You heard would instead of should. Okay, I understand. All right. Advice is something that you strongly believe someone should do. For suggestions, we tend to be more indirect. Okay. So this does tie into, yes, where should can come off too harshly, right? If we have the sentence, you shouldn't have walked home that late at night, or you should have come with me to the party. What is the issue with should then as a suggestion? What is the issue there? Does it sound should has a negative connotation, right? So how does should have a negative connotation? It sounds judgmental. Okay. So what other modal then would we use for suggestion? Would. Okay. What would be may, might? Okay, so what would be an example then of a suggestion using the modal would? Would you like a cup of tea? Okay. And may and might? Shall we? Ought to, could. Okay. If I were you, I would. Now, if I were you, I would. That's using the subjunctive mood with would. Is that more of a suggestion or is that advice? If I were you, I would. Is it suggestion or advice? Advice. You might have wanted to walk home a little earlier. Okay. So that brings me a little bit to my next point then about modals. Um, One aspect of modals then. If I have, and you could try this saying this actually into your mic. If I have, you need to take an umbrella versus you may want to take an umbrella. Can anybody try to say you need to take an umbrella and say it in a soft tone? Is that possible for anyone here to say into the microphone?
You need
Can
to take
anyone
an
give it a try?
umbrella.
Yeah, Kwang? Kong?
Yeah. You need to take an umbrella.
Yeah, okay. Can you say it harshly for me now?
You need to take an umbrella.
Judgmental. Okay. What about can anyone do the same with you may want to take an umbrella? Is it possible to say that and sound harsh when you say it?
You might want to take an umbrella.
Is that your harsh voice?
Trying to be.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, so I mean, it's difficult to do. It's difficult to do with that. Um, so what that brings me to then also is with modals. One aspect of it is using the correct modal doesn't require tonal perfection. Do we agree with that sentiment? Do we agree with that statement? Using the correct modal does not require tonal perfection. Yeah. Because when you need to take an umbrella versus may want to take an umbrella. Using a different tone with you need to take an umbrella changes the meaning, changes the intent. Might will always sound softer. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So what I'm going to do then basically, I'm going to put something on the board here. And I want to talk then about basically suggestion. What modals are we going to use to make a suggestion?
Should I see something on the board?
Oh, I'm sorry. Do you see it now?
Yes, yes.
Okay, my bad, Christina. Thank you.
No.
So what modals might we use to make a suggestion then? We've already talked about a few of them. may, might. To be polite, yeah. Be firmer, yeah. This is actually ought to. Yeah, Alan brings up a good point. When would ought to, what function would ought to be used? More formal situations. So what would be the function of the sentence here? You ought to be on time to work. What would the function there be? Obligation, moral responsibility. Right. So we often use ought to then. Yeah. We often use ought to imply a moral judgment or to communicate a moral judgment. It has, yeah, a strong implication with sole suggestion. Yeah. Okay. So what I want you guys to do then is if we have suggestion, we have, one second, we have suggestion, we have promise, instruction, request. We've done these. I'm going to put us in breakout rooms, and I want us to think about what modals can be used for these functions with examples. Okay? Then we can talk together. Okay, just one second. How do we create? I'll make 3 rooms. Okay. So we talked about promise, instruction, and request. For promise, what modals did we come up with?
Well, we had I will, I can't, I can. Also, Zoe had an idea of going to. Yeah, like I'm gonna do that.
I will, yeah, I will, I can, and then going to.
Yeah.
Okay. And then we have instruction. What did we come up with for that?
You have to do this.
You have to.
hmm
Mm-hmm.
It would be nice if you could.
It would be nice if you.
Yeah. Could you? You need to.
You need to. It would be
You,
nice if you.
you can if you can.
Mm-hmm.
If you.
Okay. So then for request, what have we come up with?
Can you do this for me, please?
Yeah. Can you do this for me, please?
I would
Can, could, would you mind, will,
Would you be
Mhm.
able to?
would you be able to?
I would appreciate if you
Mm-hmm.
take
So we
that.
have that request would be can, would.
May might be asking for permission instead of a request.
But if we're doing may and might, would that be asking for permission or doing a request? What do you think? Is may or might asking for permission or doing a request?
More for permission.
More for permission. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. So then that brings us also to for permission then. What other modals for permission would there be?
Can, but more impolitely.
Yeah, can, but more politely. So we talked also about we talked about suggestion versus advice, right? I'm sorry, I've got the kid screaming next door. So we have suggestion versus advice. What about instruction versus order? What would be the difference there in instruction versus order?
Using must versus have to.
Must versus have to. Okay. Okay. And is there any other difference between the two? Or would it just be tone could be a factor in it, but we also talked about that with modality, right? That if you use the perfect modal for it, if you use the correct modal for it, tonal perfection is not always necessary. Right. Okay. Okay, so we've talked about then about the functions. We have suggestion, promise, right? Instruction, request, order. Now, what about apology? What modal would we use to apologize? Christina says, I wish I could change it. Should have.
There isn't a modal verb we use.
No, I've for an apology, because I wish I could change it. I wish I could change it expresses regret, right? I should have done something expresses a sense of obligation or sense of regret. It ties into third conditional a little bit. Um, but how do we apologize though?
One word in English.
So we only have one word in the English language. Okay, Alan's asking for more context. So there's only one word in the English language that can express that you can use to apologize. That isn't a modal. Can anybody think of what it is? Oh, Zoe guessed it. Okay, well, Zoe knew it. Sorry. Right. Okay. Right. So when you say I'm sorry, yeah, the only way you can apologize in English. Okay. What about for agreeing or disagreeing? For the functions agree and disagree, What I'm also going to do here is I'm going to put you back into breakout rooms, okay? And think of the modals you would use to agree or disagree as functions in the English language. Okay? It'll just breakout rooms for maybe 2 or 3 minutes. Okay, so for the functions agree and disagree, what did we come up with?
So we said things like I couldn't agree with you more, or I can't agree with you more.
Okay,
And vice versa.
and vice versa. And then we have a lot from Christina here. Cannot agree
Yeah.
more. I'd bet on that. I'd bet my life on that. That's good. I can't fully agree with you. If I had to give my opinion, I must say that. Okay, good.
Yeah, it's from our group, and we've noticed that we use models more for disagreeing than to agree with people. Like we
Okay,
have.
okay. Okay, why is that, you think?
Hmm.
To disagree rather than agree?
To soften the disagreement. Like if you're agreeing with somebody, then you're quite happy to agree with someone, right? But if you don't agree with someone, you don't want to offend them necessarily, and so you use modals to soften the blow,
Okay,
I guess.
yeah. And then also, so agree and disagree, right? Soft modals. Um, for the function, we would use may, might.
I may not prove you wrong. May be wrong.
So what's an example of agreeing using a soft modal like may or might then? You must be right. That could be true. I must admit, I don't feel the same. Okay, good. What about using may or might to agree or disagree? I might be wrong. Okay. Or you might be, okay. I might be wrong to agree. Yeah. So going into that, then basically, I may agree with you about X. However, when you talked about, okay. What about on the other side of it? Because we only have time for one more thing today, is we talked about suggestion versus advice. So how can we make a suggestion without using a modal? How can we make a suggestion without using a modal? Oh, please. Please go outside. Would that be more of a actually, oh, that's good, Kong. Yeah. Why not? How about, do you mind going? Okay, good. Why don't you? Now, what would be the issue with why don't you versus why don't we? Why don't you is a good suggestion without the use of a modal, but what is the issue with using why don't we? It's an offer, yeah. And what would be the trap in that? Why don't we go to the cinema? what would be the trap of saying why of offering to somebody why don't we go to the cinema? What does the other person then have to do in response? Yeah. If we say why don't we go to the cinema, then the other person has to then what? They have to give a reason not to do it, right? So then it becomes a trap. So how would you then change that? Why don't we, what modal, how would we change that for an offer? Would you like to? Okay. Or shall we? Okay, good. Okay, good. We are running a little bit out of time here. I'm sorry, everybody, today. We've got 1 minute left. So recapping that, we're talking about recapping is how important modals are with functions in the English language. That's we often use, or we always pretty much use conditionals to teach modals, but there are other ways that we can talk about it in the classroom. Right, and if anybody wishes to email me, I'm going to send my email in the chat. And I would be happy to also try to explain some of this stuff more over email if you wish. Okay, so to recap also, the correct modal verb doesn't need tonal perfection, right? And we have these two as an example. You need to take an umbrella versus you may want to take an umbrella. So these are just a few of the things to recap today, but we are fully out of time now, so I'm going to let you guys go so that you can join the plenary session with Holly. Okay. All right. Thank you all. Thank you all for your attention. Thank you for your time.